Atheist Sociologies. Before I begin this evening, I have a couple of clarifications. Any references or particulars for the last part of the lecture, Atheist Demographics, can be found at AtheistScholar.org under either Atheist Sociologies or Atheist Demographics. This includes tables and expanded versions of the studies I mentioned. My second clarification is on the question of many contemporary sociologists claim that religion is functional. You will hear such a claim far too often tonight. Claiming functionalism concerning religion suggests that religion is necessary for people and their society to achieve cohesion and for all parts of the community to work together for common goals that are advantageous to that society. Such sociologists omit how religion tries to control people through sexual regulation, guilt, and fear of punishment for supposed transgressions. They do not mention the persecution of religious or ethnic minorities within the society, religious wars, and all the other ills religion is responsible for. The idea of religion as functional is not only false but obstructionist. It has helped keep the appropriate study of atheism from progressing. Sociology of religion and atheism. The sociology of religion concerns the role of religion in society, practices, historical background, developments, and universal themes. This lecture will discuss the four significant figures in the history and development of sociology, religion, and methodology. All four men were non-believers. Its second section will try to untangle the threads of sociological research vis-a-vis irreligion. There was a brief secular flourishing in the 1960s and 1970s with such sociologists as Peter Berger, The Sacred Canopy, 1967, predicting the decline of religion. When the predicted decline did not appear to materialize, researchers turned their attention to religion's functionalist aspect. We atheists are always ready to dispute religion's functionalism. There was a dearth of research concerning the secular individual and the irreligious organizations. This regrettable situation is changing, and there are now articles, books, and research organizations dedicated to studying secularism objectively. The non-religious viewpoint is becoming heard and understood. This lecture will feature several of the new volumes and the positive position they hold concerning secular thinking and lifestyles. We shall also explore some current demographics on atheism near the end of the lecture. Sociology of Religion and Atheism, Part 1. A significant figure in the development of sociology was the 19th century atheist Auguste Comte, who was the founder of early positivism. Positivism roughly believes that there is an order to the universe, but that the cause of events is natural, never supernatural. Comte additionally believed that the social world, as well as the natural world, is governed by invariable laws. His belief that the social sciences should follow empirical purposes is still a cornerstone of the field. His theories are important to atheist sociology because he undertook to analyze the progress of civilization. He maintained there were three stages of human civilization, and this concept of his was one of the first theories of social evolutionism. The first stage of society mankind passed through on its way to truth was the theosophical or fictitious stage. This stage was marked by people trying to explain natural phenomena by turning to animism, then polytheism, and finally monotheism. In the theosophical stage, the priest formed and/or controlled the government and were important as the intermediaries between the divine and humans on earth. The second stage was the metaphysical, during which people tried to explain phenomena by referring to mysterious abstract forces, such as nature or philosophical principles. During the second stage, Comte maintained that people thought they were practicing scientific methods, but they were not. The elite, intellectuals and aristocrats, governed during the metaphysical stage. The final stage is the scientific, when a genuine scientific methodology is developed based on observation and experiment. The scientists have control during the third stage. People attempt to find universal laws to explain all phenomena. His view regarding the three stages reflects Comte's belief in social progress. Comte's theories concerning government and religion were highly influential in their day. It was Emil Durkheim who began the academic study of sociology. Durkheim was a secular thinker who was attempting to find the universal factor or element of religion for all societies. He studied indigenous Australian tribes and their totem culture because he thought that primitive tribes captured religious ideas and practices before religion became organized. Such societies could demonstrate the earliest formation of belief. Durkheim thought that in its more advanced forms, religion provides a symbolic image of society, like a flag or even a god. The society's important facets, such as morals and ethics, are represented by this image. The image underscores or emphasizes society's importance to the members of that society and the necessity of its rules for the members. Durkheim did not feel that there was a need for a god per se for the society to be provided with social glue. He believed that the totem could be anything as long as the society regarded it as sacred. Durkheim concluded that the individual senses a social force greater than his own and gives that awareness a supernatural face. He thought that religion was the glue that gave societies cohesion. His volume, Elementary Forms of Religious Life, 1912, was very influential. Durkheim established sociology as an independent academic discipline with its own methodology. Here is his famous definition of religion. A religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, that is to say, things set apart and forbidden. Beliefs and practices which unite into one single moral community called a church, all those who adhere to them. Durkheim's definition emphasizes his conception of religion as a social function. Some contemporary sociologists of religion maintain a biased theory of religion's functionalism, despite evidence to the contrary. We shall see more of Durkheim in the upcoming lecture on atheist anthropology. Karl Marx was earlier than Durkheim and Weber. We will get to Max Weber shortly. And he is better known for his socialist political theories. If you have heard our earlier lectures on atheist history or read about that history on AtheistScholar.org, you will remember how much Marx was influenced by Ludwig Feuerbach's belief that statements about God are really projections by humans, so that religion could really be seen as anthropology. Feuerbach believed people were shunting the responsibility for making themselves and their society better by projecting exceptional qualities onto a supernatural, fictitious being. He saw religious belief as a reflection of humanity on itself and not a god. He maintained that the concept of God was an idealized version of humans' intimations of their potential. But Marx took Feuerbach's idea a step further. He decided that talk about God is really talk about the human community. Many scholars think that he found religion and belief in God merely symptoms of the inadequacy of our human societies. He was a critic of religion, however, and his introduction to the contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, 1844, discusses many of his thoughts on religion and what he considered the oppression and exploitation of the worker. Marx saw religion as a hindrance to reason and thought it masked the truth of man's lot in society. He believed that the correct way to propagate freedom was to present the truth to individuals and let them choose to accept or deny it. He never suggested prohibiting religion. He believed that religion could only be wiped out and belief in God extinguished by changing the economic and social conditions of society. Marx believed that capitalism made the worker an object and distanced him from the products he helped create. He stated that such a double objectification created alienation. He believed that the power of the state and of capital were similar to religion in that both were mystified by humans as external powers that crushed them, while both were actually human activities. Capital is the accumulated labor of the workers, and yet the workers saw capital as something that was a crushing enemy, taking up energy and their lives. Marx maintained that religion came in at this point and functioned as an ideological apparatus of the state. The worker was told that the wealthy would not get into the heaven of the next world. Workers tolerated poverty and poor working conditions because they were laying up spiritual capital for the next and better world. Marx famously defined religion as the opium of the people. Marx did not want to waste what he saw as time spent refuting God's existence, but he wanted to change human life by means of revolution. Max Weber was a major sociologist who published 4 important volumes on religion, the most well-known today being The Protestant Ethic and The Spirit of Capitalism, 1905. His other sociological studies of religion were on China, ancient Judaism, and India, in which he focused on the respective countries' non-development of capitalism. He is typically cited, along with Marx and Durkheim, as one of the 3 principal architects of modern social science. He was an atheist who became famous for his studies on politics, economics, and religion. Weber's work was an answer to Karl Marx, as Weber did not accept Marx's theory of religion or economics. He thought, instead, that men needed some way to reconcile their belief in an extraordinarily powerful God with their knowledge of the imperfection and evil of the world. Their God not only created, but ruled over such a flawed universe. In addition, people were troubled by their observation of the wicked prospering and the good suffering. Religion, Weber maintained, not only provided answers, but motivation. Salvation meant attaining relief from the suffering and bestowed meaning on the world. People became motivated to attain salvation. Weber believed that Calvinism's belief in predestination gave people purpose and aided the rise of capitalism. Max Weber's brilliant analysis of the Protestant religion's effect on the rise of capitalism, although controversial, remains an important classic in sociology. Weber did not undertake a criticism of Calvinist Protestantism, but an analysis. He maintained that the idea of predestination in the Protestant religion created anxiety in believers. If a person was preordained to attain heaven or be punished in hell, how could he ascertain whether he was a saved individual? The answer was to work hard, postpone or disavow pleasure, and pile up as much wealth as possible. Dedication to work not only was an indicator of salvation, it also made or defined the individual. Both Kant and Hegel, European philosophers, also believed that the object of work was to become rather than object acquisition. Eventually, Calvinism was undermined by its own doctrines, leaving capitalism as the dominant paradigm. Weber attempts to refute Marx in this volume. The text is a brilliant analysis of both religion and economics. Weber's other works on ancient Judaism, India, and China attempted to analyze why those societies did not develop capitalism. They are cogent investigations of bureaucracies. Weber was ambivalent about capitalism. He liked the spirit of democracy and science that capitalism encouraged, but thought that it had contributed to the disenchantment of the world. Although dated, his analyses are worth consideration. Sociology of Religion and Atheism, Part 2. The sorry state of sociological and psychological inquiry into secularism has been an issue for atheists and some sociologists. We do not have enough studies to give us an understanding of the positive views and lifestyles of individuals who do not believe in a God or supernatural events, nor do we have a complete picture of the kinds of irreligious people who do not participate in organizations which are associated with the supernatural and the divine. The situation has begun to change. There is more and more data being collected on atheist and atheist organizations, and more research is being done in the neglected area of secularism. This lecture, part 2, will discuss the current interest and the data on the growth of secularism. But first, it is important to look briefly at the reasons for the sociological neglect of irreligion. The most important reason for the dearth of research into atheist concern seemed to be the dominance of a functionalist view of religion as a universal feature of societies. The broad scope of the functionalist view works to deny the legitimacy of unbelief and its commitment to a meaningful life. The same inattention to secularism pertains to the psychological study of religion. Frank L. Pasquale notes that some scholars have suggested that framing the field in terms of belief or unbelief tends toward exclusion rather than recognition of desirable alternatives to a religious point of view. There are other reasons, such as the fact that institutionalized religion favors the existing power structure and often works in tandem with it. The views of those who dissent from religion are seen as illegitimate. This theory is problematical with regard to the United States, however, as most atheists are not in fundamental disagreement with the government. The United States Constitution gives the irreligious an opportunity to settle grievances in court with varying success. In the mid-1960s, there were many theories of secularism, with scholars such as Peter Berger predicting a rise of the secular and a withering of traditional religion. Berger's Sacred Canopy, Elements of a Sociological Theory of Religion, 1967, is an excellent volume and was very influential at the time of its publication. There are scholars who believe Berger's theory of secularism is still valid. Berger's book is a classic in the field, considered one of the most important volumes concerning the rise of secularism. Berger has since rejected his theory, but with some qualifications. Many sociologists, for reasons we have seen in the lecture, have denied the concept of secularism, but there are important thinkers who find it valid and robust. One of the principal reasons for the temporary waning of secular theory is that secularism never took place, although Berger and other scholars had predicted it. Instead, there seemed to be a flourishing of religion. Yet, as can be seen from the current research, there is a steady rise of secularism that continues despite the vociferous claims that religion is spreading over the globe. That is not the case. Religion is declining, and there are statistics and research to prove it. Berger has a lucid, accessible style, and the book is written in the tradition of the humanities with depth and penetration. The first part of Sacred Canopy concerns the human construction of religion. Berger believes that people exteriorize their inner thoughts and fears in the attempt to fill the world with meaning. In the exteriorization process, people create a culture and a religion and then re-interiorize them. He thinks that people have a masochistic attitude, particularly in their relation to monotheism. He maintains that religion serves as a sacred canopy, the title of his book. Religion is a protective covering that gives meaning to the world, including suffering and death. Religion is additionally used to maintain the status quo of the power structure, casting dissenters as evil or mad. People interiorize societal dictates that Berger calls the nomos, or laws. We depend on these laws to tell us what to do and how to respond to the world by way of our parents and other elders. Religion abets that process by painting a detailed picture of how the workings of nature, society, and authority are rooted in the cosmos and are not only correct, but are unchanging. Humans fear being plunged into chaos, so they accept the orderly pattern explained and justified by religion. They no longer realize that their belief is a human creation. Berger calls this process reification. He believes that language is an important factor in the sequence. Berger believed there would be an all-encompassing secularization of the world. He cited the rise of science, the spread of the more interior-oriented Protestant religion, the loss of the church's monopoly of worship and truth, and their marketplace competition for members. He maintained that religion had become more private and psychological, and at the same time more pluralized. He stated that religion was being forced to compete with other institutions and thought systems, such as revolution or nationalism, for the authority to define reality. What had been a firm fact in religion for people had now become a religious preference. Berger stated that religion was suffering from a crisis of credibility. Secularization, pluralization, and subjectivity would undermine religion and give rise to a secular world. Berger's theory was very influential in its day, and we can see from the data that it is likely correct. The process of secularism has been much slower than Berger predicted, but it is sure and inexorable. Secularization theory was abandoned too soon. Colin Campbell and N.J. Nemerth both made attempts in the late 1960s and 1970s at analyzing a religion and looked at the organizational aspects of secular movements. Campbell also tried to determine why there had been a lack of research into non-religious movements. He concluded this was due to the functional view of religion. He found that under the functional view, religion was considered a universal feature of societies. With this view, there is such an unreliably broad definition of sacred or religious that irreligion is ignored or overlooked. Research is reconceptualized under the terms of invisible religion or implicit religious. So secular subjects such as Marxism, psychoanalysis, environmentalism, or sporting events are classified as civil religious ceremonies. There is a tendency concerning such activities to assume a sacred activity aspect, but there are obvious dangers to placing secular activities under such a broad blanket. It dismisses and ignores alternative worldviews and social behaviors that are irreligious, or at the least, non-religious in a serious sense. It is evident that such tendencies in sociology studies pushes irreligion to the background. Of course, what happens in such groupings is a serious disservice to the atheist community. It tends to blur the significant differences between simply absence of religion, such as sports, although lately and egregiously, religiosity and football have become intermingled. It also too frequently ignores those people and communities that reject or deliberately avoid religious, sacred, or transcendental beliefs and practices. Interestingly enough, European sociologists such as Steve Bruce from England and others who we will discuss in a few minutes have paid attention and written and commented on secularization. But American study of secularization is only recently escaping the danger of being ignored. When we arrive at demographics this evening, we will see how the situation has improved. American sociologists still love to focus on what they call rational choice. What is rational about religious belief? And they seem to love market and economic theories of religion that stress the health and economic and general well-being connected with church affiliation. As an older American, I can assure everyone that older Americans are particularly vulnerable to religious propaganda concerning claims from health givers, social workers, and the media that the general health and happiness of senior citizens is much better when they are affiliated with religious organizations. That such facts are fueled by poor research and wanting to find what is not there can be associated with the positive view of religion, which is simply another reason for the paucity of research. It is no secret that many of the researchers hold theistic worldviews, or if not religious, believed in the aforementioned functionalism about religion, and so are uninterested in pursuing information about irreligion. Richard Sloan, a professor of behaviorist medicine at Columbia University, has written a book called Blind Faith: The Unholy Alliance Between Science and Medicine, 2006. In his book, Sloan discusses the skewed and sloppy methodology of many research projects favoring religion, such as proving the benefits of prayer and the health-enhancing advantages of regular church attendance. Professor Sloan states that in some studies maintaining the so-called benefits of religion, the researchers simply saw what they wanted to see. James Loiba's project of surveying scientists about their non-belief in God and immortality, though limited, yielded interesting results in 1914 and 1933 and has been replicated in the 1990s. He found that a majority of U.S. scientists did not believe in God or immortality, and the numbers increased with the more elite scientists. But even though there were encouraging results in secular research, religion did not seem to be withering. The advocates of secularism were correct, but probably too optimistic about predictions of religion's rapid decline in the United States. When secularism did not immediately take hold as the dominant paradigm, researchers turned elsewhere. Rodney Stark and William Sims Bainbridge, proponents of theories concerning religion's resurgence and beneficial impact, came into prominence in the sociology of religion from the late 1970s until the present day. More sociologists followed their lead. Research into irreligion stalled. It is very odd, therefore, that with the focus on religion in sociology, there has been very little research on what is termed mature religion. But we secularists cry, what is mature about any religious belief? So we atheists are unlikely to concur that any religion is mature. However, we can briefly look at Gordon Allport's study, The Individual and His Religion, 1950, in which he has contrasted different types of religiosity. He cites mature belief that is intrinsic, focused on ends, and extrinsic, focused on means, and adds a third form, quest, that is more skeptical and questing. While research in this area of religion is scanty, it is of more interest to atheists that no comparable study of non-belief or religion has been undertaken. As a matter of fact, scholars have found that there is a strong tendency in some, and for atheists too many, areas of sociological study that tend to describe irreligion, whether skeptical, scientific, or naturalistic, as puerile, myopic, pathological, and inferior to religious belief. So, faith has been privileged over reason. It is very difficult to respect such points of view and the studies undertaken on their behalf. It seems that standards must be inferior in a field where empiricism is not privileged over finding what one wants to find. It is not only despicable, it is not even respectable. Fortunately, such biased work is not undertaken by the majority of the profession. And now we are seeing reports that contradict such views, and those reports are contradicting what was a formerly negative view of irreligion. There is one excellent volume that I can recommend, and that is the Oxford Handbook of the Sociology of Religion. Its editor is Peter B. Clark, 2009. There are 57 contributions to this volume, and it is a very impressive book. The topics are up to date, and the authors use the latest research. The handbook opens the door for a study of religion globally, which many sociology texts ignore or mention in passing. Some of the topics covered are methodology, gender and religion, art and religion, religious diversity, religious violence, and more. The range and depth of topics makes the handbook an excellent text for the general reader. The book is flawed, however, and seriously so in the case of the essay on atheism. There are 3 articles on secularism, which is a decent number for such a wide-ranging volume. But Clark's choice of scholar for the atheism essay is very disappointing. Atheism was written by William Sims Bainbridge, one of the first sociologists to begin discussing religion's functionalism and resurgence in the late 1970s. He is a strong proponent of religion, and while affecting an objective tone, scatters negative statements about atheists from opinion polls throughout the entire article and claims that the atheist community might be too small and diverse to study adequately. Bainbridge admits that secularism could be on the rise and might benefit from the new scientific research on the brain. He also concedes a point to naturalists that humans do not appear to have an immortal soul. His article is not recommended except as an example of the sort of academic prejudice against secularism and atheism too prevalent in some quarters of the sociology of religion. The Oxford Handbook offers a fine essay by Inger Furseth on religion in the works of Jürgen Habermas, Pierre Bourdieu, and Michel Foucault, 3 important continental thinkers, with a generally negative view of religion. There is a very enlightening and objective essay on secularism by Karel Dobelaar, a well-thought-of expert in the field. Dobelaar believes that secularism is on the rise and quotes studies that confirm the concept that many scholars would like to deny. His article is highly recommended. Before moving on to the continent and the interesting views held by European thinkers on religion, I would like to go over several points identified by Frank L. Pasquale, who has identified some interesting areas that need further study. There are many areas, even with the improvement in studies of the irreligious, that secular scholars have identified as wholly or partially unanswered. Pasquale lists some of them. Why, when religiosity is so prevalent with widely touted rewards, do so many people not only adopt but remain committed to an irreligious worldview? What distinguishable non-religious worldviews can be identified, or irreligious ones? Is it meaningful to distinguish between mature and immature, positive or negative, enlightened or fundamentalist forms of unbelief or irreligion? What are the types, context, antecedents, and correlates of scientists' worldviews? What are the patterns of social behavior and organizational affiliation among the irreligious? Are there identifiable differences between unbelievers who affiliate with organizations pertinent to their worldviews and those who do not? The present situation is very encouraging. Before the lecture details the dramatically changing picture of interest in secularism and the increase in research into irreligion, we will turn to the continent and some of its most prominent contemporary thinkers in philosophy, sociology, and political science. Their views are of interest to the secular scholar. Both Michel Foucault and Pierre Bourdieu are deceased, but their influence on contemporary thought, as well as the importance of Jürgen Habermas's philosophy, continues to be consequential. Jürgen Habermas concludes that post-metaphysical thought is prepared to learn from religion, but remains agnostic in the process. He sees religion severed from practical reason, social context, and everyday experience. Pierre Bourdieu's aim is to detect the strategies used by the dominant classes to sustain their power and prestige. Power and domination function in the sense that the dominant culture establishes the true religion versus heresy. True religion always favors those in power. This means those who are dominated tend to diminish themselves and their own religious perceptions. Bourdieu calls this process symbolic violence. He maintains that formation of meaning and identity can be constituted by power. Michel Foucault's critique of religion rests on 5 interrelated factors. First, religion and culture are seen as integrated in his work. Second, he believes religious discourse is framed and positioned in and through the human process of power knowledge. Third, discourses on religious faith and practice center on the body, for example, by regulating sexuality through discourses on sin and salvation. Fourth, religion is a system of power as it orders life through a set of forced relations. Fifth, religion attempts to make individuals govern the self. In modern societies, people discipline themselves to be good citizens and diligent workers. Many atheist Americans will disagree with Foucault that practices they regard as positive, such as good citizenry and self-discipline, are necessarily linked to religion. Foucault believed his critique held true for all regimes of power knowledge. He thought that liberation might be affected if people left religion behind. But at one point, he maintained that religion might be useful in criticizing government control. His position possibly contributed to his support of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. He later distanced himself from endorsement of Iran's theocratic regime. Continental thinkers' stances concerning religion are more nuanced and more critical than comparable thinking in the United States. But since the 1990s up to the present, a groundswell of interest in secularism can be seen and welcomed in America. This lecture will briefly touch on some of the many interesting developments taking place in sociological research with regard to irreligion. It is important to keep in mind that one of the growing religious categories in the General Social Survey is none. N.J. Nemorath and Mark Chavez have broadened the definition of secularity to neo-secularity and include the decline of religious authority. Mark Chavez has written an extremely important volume, which I have mentioned in a previous lecture, Atheism and the Law. It is Congregations in America, 2004. See AtheistScholar.org, Atheism and the Law, the book list. In 1998, there was an important study, the first of its kind in America, called the 1998 National Congregation Survey. Chavez was the principal investigator, and his findings from the results of 1,236 congregations in this country are eye-opening. Overblown media coverage and the political battles in Washington, D.C. have created a false picture of American churches giving significant aid and support to the disadvantaged. Chavez has discovered that most United States congregations focus on the most fleeting contact, if any at all, with needy people. Since the majority of American congregations are small, with 60% of them having fewer than 100 members, there is no real untapped resource for social programs. The actual activity the churches engage in is cultural, in an effort to get their spiritual message across to congregants. It does not hurt that these activities entertain as well. American churches use educational programs, theatrical performances, and music for the edification of their members. Music is especially important to the houses of worship. Chavez states that churches are one of the few places left in this country where people sing together. It seems that the idea of churches performing much needed social services in the United States is one more myth. Chavez has performed an important service by dispelling the miasma and letting us see the reality. The media has not given his findings much coverage. Steve Bruce, the author of God is Dead, Secularism in the West, 2002, is a vocal supporter of the continued rise of secularism and maintains that its putative decline is a myth. He writes with verve and logic and presents sociological facts that support his salient argument. He maintains that secularism is an inexorable process and that it has been going on at least 150 years in England. His first chapter on the secularism paradigm is difficult for beginners, but the rest of the book is very accessible for all readers. Bruce's central theme is that there has been a long-term decline in the power, popularity and prestige of religious beliefs and rituals. He believes the decline has been brought about by modernity, individualism, diversity, and egalitarianism. He dismisses the trend to New Age spiritualism and does not believe it will lead to any sort of religious revival. He cannot see how a shared faith can be made from a low salience world of pick and mix religion. He maintains that the prominent philosophy of the current day, prosperous West, is based on the authority of the individual autonomous consumer. Bruce has statistics and methodology to back up his claims. He focuses 2 chapters on academic disputes concerning the sociology of religion. One of these chapters discusses the methodological difficulties with surveys that show high unofficial belief. He maintains that the questions are frequently biased and the definitions of belief are twisted or watered down to support a weak theory. Much of God is Dead discusses England, but Bruce does have 1 chapter on the United States. He thinks that the U.S. is behind the rest of the prosperous West by perhaps 50 years, but that secularity is happening here also. Bruce E. Huntsberger and Bob Altemeyer have co-authored a volume titled Atheist, a Groundbreaking Study of America's Non-Believers, 2006, a research survey of atheist clubs in San Francisco, Idaho, and Alabama. As a comparison, they surveyed a group of Canadian parents of their students. It is a limited study, but is considered methodologically sound. A recent study by Philip S. Brenner identifying importance and the over-reporting of religious service attendance confirmed that Americans consistently report more regular church attendance, claiming 35 to 45%, than the reality. Brenner compared the alleged statistics with time diary data and found that regular attendance was about 24 to 25%. Such consistent over-reporting is singular to Americans, Brenner found. The survey was reported in the TSSI news service with a succinct headline, Americans Stretch Truth About Church Attendance. Pippa Norris and Ronald Engelhardt have written Sacred and Secular, Religion and Politics Worldwide, 2011, a volume that argues for the pronounced flourishing of secularism in the Western industrialized countries of the world as they attain economic and existential security. However, religion grows stronger in economically challenged societies throughout the world. Engelhardt has written papers concerning Western world secularism that are a welcome addition to the survey of irreligion. Phil Zuckerman is a persistent voice in the study of irreligion, and his works are an invaluable resource for objective data for atheists. He has authored 1 book on atheism in Scandinavia, which demonstrates that people in Denmark and Sweden live secular lives that are both moral and content. Society Without God, 2006, contradicts the illusion of many Americans that belief in God is necessary for a civil society. Zuckerman has edited a 2-volume work entitled Atheism and Secularity, 2009, with essays by many distinguished sociologists. Both of these works are reviewed more thoroughly in the book list on AtheistScholar.org, Atheist Sociologies. Professor Zuckerman has authored articles on the positive aspects of atheism and the belief that secularism is on the rise and will continue. In 2009, he wrote an informative article called Atheism, Secularity, and Well-Being, How the Findings of Social Science Counter Negative Stereotypes and Assumptions. The text is an excellent look at atheists in general and a robust argument against the stereotyped negative picture of atheists. Zuckerman and Gregory Paul authored an article for The Edge in 2007, Why the Gods Are Not Winning, that is a very strong argument for the rise of secularism using data and sound methodology. Gregory S. Paul authored a paper in 2005 called Cross-National Correlations of Quantifiable Social Health with Popular Religiosity and Secularism in the Prosperous Democracies. He maintains, with data to corroborate, that while the more secular prosperous democracies in the West show increasing social health, the religious United States stands out for its shortcomings in that area. The statistical picture builds up and demonstrates that the U.S. has higher homicide rates, higher juvenile and early adult mortality, STD infection rates, and teen pregnancy and abortion rates. Paul states that American exceptionalism appears to be that of societal dysfunction rather than the illusion of Americans that our country is a shining city on the hill, an example to the skeptical nations of the world. Religiosity and its undue influence on government and social thought is a large factor in holding our country back from reaching rational practices in many areas of ethics, particularly crime and sexuality. There are developments for research projects on atheism and secularism that are very encouraging. Barry Kosman and Ariella Kaiser have authored the book Religion in a Free Market, Religious and Non-Religious Americans, Who, What, Why, and Where, 2006. They were the principal researchers of the American Religious Identification Survey, ARIS, published in 2008, which has been extensively quoted in the media. Joseph Hammer, a psychology graduate student at the University of Missouri, has begun a web research atheist project called AtheistResearch.org. In Cambridge, England, Lois Lee, a sociology graduate, has started a non-religion and secularity research network on the web. In the case of the recent books and articles by authors such as Zuckerman and Bruce, it is a very good thing to have the study of secularism on the rise once more. Its theories and predictions confirmed with research from well-regarded sociologists. Secularism is making strides in taking back the field of research from religion as functionalism. Such an occurrence is a matter of celebration in an area of studies begun by the great secular sociologists, Weber, Marx, Comte, and Durkheim. Atheist Demographics. Finding an estimate for the number of atheists during our colonial period is very difficult, but naming disbelievers, agnostics, and deists as identified by their words is easier. We only need to think of Thomas Jefferson for a beginning. There were many religious denominations in the colonial period, but attendance at services at best estimates was 4% of the population. In the present day, at least 2 out of 3 U.S. citizens identify with a denomination. Commerce was the driving force that held the most common bound. Making a living or sustaining oneself in any fashion demanded a great deal of energy and required tolerance and cooperation. Some of the affiliated in colonial times could have been unbelievers, but there were no statistical gatherings at that time. Today, who are the atheists? What are their major characteristics? Can an atheist find a profile among the group demographics presented? How does one compare with the statistical group known as the nones? At the bottom of many survey tables can be seen none, atheist, agnostic, deist as separate categories. The nones in surveys are sometimes made up of self-identified atheists or agnostics. Researchers group these categories for statistical purposes. For further breakdown among the 3 groups, please always refer to the original studies on AtheistScholar.org. All the studies I mentioned can be found in these 2 categories, Atheist Sociologies and also Atheist Demographics. An atheist rejects the concept of God or gods. An agnostic cannot prove or disprove the concept of God. Intellectually, agnostics stand closest to the atheists. The deist might think that a supreme being started it all and withdrew its intervention, but not its love. The nones answer none to any affiliations on the surveys. The nones reject all categories. Many researchers suspect that some respondents to the none category are reluctant to identify themselves as atheist or agnostic because of social pressures, so they select none as their answer. Further research in this area is needed. The none group, including atheists, agnostics, and deists, is in the fastest growing religious minority in the United States and in many countries of the world. Nuns are 16 to 20% of the world population and growing. As a group, compared to believers, atheists and agnostics are represented by a majority of men. The education level attained by atheists and agnostics is usually to the 16th or the 18th year in the educational system, which would mean most of them have a basic college education or higher. Compared to believers, they enjoy a higher socioeconomic status. Urban areas seem to be preferred by atheists. Almost all atheists embrace liberal politics. The worldwide population of atheists fluctuates between 500 million and 750 million, varying from researcher to researcher as discussed above. Our neighbors to the north in Canada show a 19 to 26% rate of atheism. In the United States, the rates shift according to the question asked. 5% of Americans say they do not believe in God. 4.6% say they do not believe in anything beyond the physical world. 9% respond that they have no faith. But in all studies, there is every indication that respondents to disbelief, none, atheism, and agnosticism are growing over a period of years. Abrams and Yapple have constructed a mathematical model demonstrating a loop between the loss of utility in a given society for a religious group, which then feeds the growth of its opposite. As members of the dominant group, religion, perceive the usefulness of religion as lacking, those members are attracted to the opposite minority, atheism, which then experiences a growth as the dominant group declines. Abrams and Yapple applied this model worldwide and found consistency. A cursory examination of religion polls and surveys shows that the growth of non-believers is increasing worldwide with few exceptions. Those who respond to religion with indifference and rejection come in fourth place by rank behind Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. Atheists far outnumber Mormons, Sikhs, and Buddhists worldwide. The nations with the highest degrees of organic atheism, that which emerges from within the citizenship rather than from the government, include most of the nations of Europe, Japan, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, and Israel. However, atheism is virtually non-existent in most of Africa, South America, the Middle East, and Asia. Most nations characterized by a high degree of individual and societal security have the highest rates of organic atheism. And conversely, nations characterized by low degrees of individual and societal security have the lowest rates of organic atheism and the highest degrees of belief. High levels of organic atheism are strongly correlated with high levels of societal health, such as low poverty rates and strong gender equality. In many societies, atheism is growing. However, throughout much of the world, particularly among the poorest nations with the highest birth rates, atheism is barely discernible. This pattern repeats again and again. The Cosman findings are used to confirm earlier studies that show Americans progressing at a perceptible rate towards secularity. American Christianity is not threatened with religions from other parts of the world or newly formed international religions movements, but from a denial of all organized religions. Table 1 and 2 in the Cosman study reveal several trends of interest to atheists. Self-identified atheists in America grew between 1990 and 2008 from 902,000 to 1,621,000. The nuns grew from 14 million to 34 million in the same period. The rise of the nuns has been one of the most important trends on the American religious scene since 1990. Combining the atheists, agnostics, and the nuns, the total is 16.6%. The above-mentioned group took a 37% lead as a percentage of growth of the total survey population growth, leaving behind all other categories. Please see the table on AtheistScholar.org. Developed countries, excluding the USA, emphasis mine, have universally high populations of atheists, usually between 40 and 90% of the population. The highest populations of atheists are found in Scandinavia and Japan. Discrimination against atheists. In 1987, Republican presidential candidate George H.W. Bush was asked by Robert Sherman, a reporter for the American Atheist News Journal, if he recognized the equal citizenship and patriotism of atheists in America. Bush responded, "No, I don't know that atheists should be considered as citizens, nor should they be considered as patriots. This is one nation under God." His answer has become iconic in expression of American religious and Christian bigotry toward atheists. Atheists are the highest discriminated against group in the United States. 76% of survey respondents said they would only vote for a religious candidate. When given a choice for a marriage partner, atheist was always last on any list. Remember, in contrast to this negative image, statistics show that atheists are higher educated, are in the upper income brackets, have a lower divorce rate than evangelicals, have fewer children, and more close-knit families. Atheists are also underrepresented in all criminal activities, including murder, rape, and bank robbery. In addition, on numerous respected measures of societal success, rates of poverty, teenage pregnancy, abortion, sexually transmitted diseases, obesity, drug use and crime, as well as economics, high levels of secularity are consistently correlated with positive outcomes in first world nations. None of the secular advanced democracies suffers from the combined social ills seen here in Christian America. A recent study, February 2011, suggests when atheist presence is more prevalent in a given society, that anti-atheist prejudice among religious believers is reduced. It also suggests that there was a reduction of distrust by believers toward atheists. The series of experiments suggested that there was an all-around change in attitude as atheist numbers increased. As a result, people became more positive in their thinking about atheists. Atheists and agnostics also scored higher on a test of religious knowledge. In September of 2010, Pew Research Center published a study showing that all religious groups in the USA were outscored by the atheist on religion's role in society, knowledge of world religions, and about the role of the USA Constitution with regard to religion and state. The atheists and agnostics scored the highest at 20.9 against the participants' average of 16.0. Atheism and secularism around the world. Secularism is a tendency, not an iron law. The many thinkers of the past and present who predicted the disappearance of religion eventually in the 20th and 21st centuries might be disappointed by the obvious continued presence of religious institutions. But if they looked closely worldwide, they would see the emergence of an unmistakable pattern. Because the churches are still with us does not negate the measurable growth in secularity. The basic theory still holds true. With few exceptions, the United States, when a society experiences economic growth to the point where citizens have access to education, a sustainable opportunity to employment, readily available health care, and a secure retirement, they will be more secure. Such a society will, as a rule, move from religious to secular. Some will experience a long transitional period whereby the trappings of religion are just that, trappings, and the political sway religion once held is dissipated. The people will lose their sense of dread because of hard-fought survival and the fear engendered by their very lives being constantly threatened. This is happening in secure societies, and it is statistically significant. Where the positive aspects are not happening, religion will hold sway. When there is continued dependence on religion, there are lower health standards and weak education possibilities, employment is insecure or non-existent, and tyranny after tyranny can be observed. It is happening, and it is measurable. The less religious, more secular, prosperous nations in the world, such as France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Great Britain, Japan, South Korea, and the Netherlands, have moved away from sectarianism towards secularism. These countries enjoy a higher standard of living as measured by health care, job security, and opportunities for education. The more religious, less secular nations in the world, such as Indonesia, the Arab world, and the African nations, show the opposite. Study after study confirm these patterns, and we are repeating them this evening. The new study, Sex and Secularism, by Darrell Ray and Amanda Brown, while exploring sexuality among secularists, restates characteristics of non-believers that have been presented by other researchers in demographics. 11,217 atheists responded. There are consistencies with other studies between Ray and Brown's results. Here are some of the figures, and you'll see that they're very similar to earlier studies. 69% of atheists were male and 29% were female. Atheists are predominantly male. The researchers admitted that their sample group is younger, having come from various college campuses. For this study, 67% of atheists were younger than 35 years versus Pew 2007, in which 34% were younger than 35 years, and in Eris 2008, where 22% were younger than 35 years. Ray and Brown worked with an overall younger group. The new atheists are on the average younger. And those of us at the 2012 Washington, D.C. Reason Rally saw a huge number of young non-believers. Higher education showed 72.6% of atheists over 25 years of age with associate's degrees or higher. The USA average is 49.1%. Women atheists were slightly ahead with bachelor's and master's degrees. 8% of men and 5% of women atheists held doctorates. Atheists are better educated than believers. Income level for atheists 25 years old and over showed 60.4% at $50,000, while 24.1% earned $100,000 or more. Atheists are in higher income brackets than believers. The sex, guilt, religion, and atheism relationship this study establishes is well worth your visit to AtheistScholar.org, Atheist Demographics. You will find that atheists have more enjoyable sexual encounters, experience little or no guilt, and are much more open to experimentation and sexual exploration. The report is very revealing. The chart and tables are also exemplary. Additionally, there are some interesting results of a few current polls taken in the United States. 68% of people under 30 in this country never doubt the existence of God, a pretty high number, but it is down considerably from 83% in 2007. The unaffiliated, people who do not belong to any organized religion, is now about 16 to 19% in the United States. They are not necessarily atheists or agnostics, however. Only 44% of Americans have confidence in religion, down from 66% in 1973. The results from a June 7 to 10, 2012 Gallup poll shows that 9 in 10 Americans would vote for a candidate who is black, or a woman, or a Catholic, Hispanic, or Jewish. 56% would vote for a Muslim, 80% for a Mormon, 68% for a gay or lesbian, and naturally, atheists are at the bottom, but the results for us are not bad. 54% of Americans say they would vote for an atheist. The growth of disbelief in the 20th century from 1900 through 2000 showed a vast upsurge in actual numbers. As we've said before, This pushed unbelievers to the fourth largest group in the world, behind Christians, Muslims, and Hindus. In the span of 100 years, unbelievers grew from a few million worldwide to almost 1 billion human beings worldwide. Such an outburst of growth far surpasses any religion in the 20th century and perhaps history. Based on the percentages of movement toward atheism to this point, non-believers or nones will continue to expand at measurable rates both in the world and in the United States. This is a cause for rejoicing on the part of the secular community. A recent New York Times editorial by Peter Brooks, that stealth writer for religion, called this growing group of nones the unchurched. It is an interesting designation. He does not seem to want to call us what many of us are in that group of nones: agnostics, atheists, non-believers. Many of us have not merely shed churches, we have shed gods. Ross Douthat wrote an interesting op-ed in the July 15th New York Times, 2012. Can liberal religion be saved? He states that liberal Christianity has simply collapsed, that practically every denomination, Methodist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, that has tried to adapt itself has seen an Episcopal-style plunge in church attendance. The figures he cites for the Episcopalian Church are dismal. In the last decade, average Sunday attendance dropped 23%. He also cites the compromised position, though, of the most successful Christian bodies, which he says have often been politically conservative but theologically shallow, preaching a gospel of health and wealth. He is an advocate for religion, and his facts are even more compelling because of that. Religion in the United States is in decline, in serious trouble, and amen to that. I would like to close with a few thoughts from Bill Cook, who has some interesting observations. He states that free thinkers and the religious both have an important commonality. They both share a need to try to answer questions that are frequently seen as non-answerable and also not necessary to enjoyment or even peace of mind in life. Free thinkers in general find their rejection of the transcendent or supernatural enhances their love of life and their commitment to making our world and society an improved place. We atheists have resolved many of the important questions and have come to a place of peace of mind with ourselves, our society, and our world. It is time that studies of atheists reflect that fullness of being that we non-believers experience. Thank you for your attention tonight.